The universe of the Elder Scrolls can be described as a dangerous yet beautiful one that gamers have immersed themselves in for close to 3 decades now. People often talk about the dragons, the adventures, and the fascinating encounters with the unique characters found in this world. However, underneath this rich tapestry of lore that many laymen can certainly appreciate lies a cruel, chaotic mess strewn with countless atrocities awash with blood, much like our reality. In this video, we'll cover 10 of the worst genocides to have occurred in the Elder Scrolls universe, many in which entire species were wiped out during these genocidal rampages. Starting off at number 10, the Barsaebic Ayleids conquest of Blackmarsh. Following a great civil war among the Ayleids towards the end of the Merethic era, the exiled Barsaebic Ayleids had migrated to Blackmarsh and began conquering the region as their new home, putting them in conflict with the numerous species that inhabited the Great Swamp. As cruel and vicious as their heartland brethren, the Barsaebic Ayleids employed powerful necromancy to steal the souls of the indigenous tribes of the Black Marsh, and also went out of their way to enslave them. One such Argonian tribe that was in conflict with the encroaching Ayleids were the Root Whisper tribe. In order to keep the remaining souls of its Argonians safe, the history of the Root Whisper stored the souls of the survivors in an artifact that became known as the Remnant of Argon. The Barsaebic Ayleids, however, continued their conquest of Blackmarsh and continued to practice their necromancy against several other tribes of Argonians. The Ayleids were truly a cruel lot. Genocide against the living wasn't enough. They even needed to deny innocent beings of a peaceful afterlife. Number 9. The Aldmer wipe out the Fae. The Aldmer, or the Proto-Elves, first arrived in Tamriel during the early Merethic era. Led by High Lord Torinan, the Aldmer first landed in the Somerset Isles just north of the city of Firsthold in Auridon, hence its name. While colonizing the archipelago, the Aldmer encountered the Fae, or the Fairy, who were hostile to the presence of the elven settlers. Amongst the Fae were the Nedes, godlike beings who took the form of men, or a number of men, composed of earth and surrounded by a host of other Fae known as Sylphim. Other hostile Fae to the Aldmer were the Iliadi, giants taller than trees with heads covered by numerous eyes. During the colonization of the Somerset Isles, High Lord Torinan and his settlers used the Varla stones in conjunction with a runic magic known as Herograms to call upon magicka directly from the stars and cast powerful spells against the Fae. Within a few years, the Nedes and the Iliadi were slaughtered to the point of extinction. Incidentally, the local Welwa population was also rendered extinct. However, the Sapiarchs of the Crystal Tower reintroduced the Welwa back into the Somerset ecosystem after a thriving population was discovered in Craglorn. At number 8, the extermination of the left-handed elves. According to the Red Guards, their Yakutan ancestors had a hateful relationship with the western continent's population of elves known as the Sinistral Elves, or more commonly called the left-handed elves. The conflict and wars between the Yakutans and the left-handed elves lasted for over 1,000 years. Decided victory came to the Yakutans upon the intervention of the gods Leki and Diagna. Leki, who taught the Onsai the ephemeral fight, which finally allowed the Yakutans to choose a war leader to unify them, and Diagna, who was said to be an avatar of the Hunding, gave the Yakutans orichalc weapons, which were said to have been instrumental in the defeat of the left-handed elves. The Yakutans' victory over the left-handed elves was so complete that they were driven from the western continent, with the survivors fleeing, eventually arriving on the Sisters Archipelago and warring with the Druid clans for control. The left-handed elves would eventually conquer the island of Amanos and build a great fortress there. As the left-handed elves attempted to conquer the rest of the Isles during their invasion of Iphalon, Mount Firesong erupted rather catastrophically and led to many of the elves' deaths. Unfortunately for the survivors, little over 100 years later, Yokudan settlers would arrive in the Sisters and reignite the conflict with their ancient enemy, leading to the extermination of the left-handed elves from the islands. It is widely believed that the left-handed elves are extinct in modern Tamriel, though some suggest some sort of connection between them and the Malmer. Number 7. The Ra-Gada Invasion. By the time of the First Era, the Yokudan Empire had been subject to a series of civil wars and major internal conflicts due to declining power of the Yokudan Emperor, allowing for several lesser nobles and warlords to try and carve territory and authority for themselves. This finally culminated in the War of the Singers, where the legendary sword saint Thrandar Hunding crushed the Yokudan Emperor's forces and eventually led his armies out of Yokuda towards modern Hammerfell in a series of 4 migrational waves. Known as the Ra-Gada, or Warrior Wave, these colonists utterly slaughtered the indigenous populations of goblins, elves, and Nedic humans. In the first migration, Thrandar Hunding found the coast of Hammerfell settled with the flint-toothed goblin tribe, and refusing to share land with the goblins, immediately declared war on the tribe and began slaughtering them indiscriminately. Thrandar Hunding would eventually die in battle against the goblins, but his son Divad would continue the conquest, eventually pushing the Ra-Gada borders well into the Alakir Desert. One group of Ra-Gada settlers, led by the Yokudan king Zak W, discovered the elven city of Salas-En, inhabited by the Altmeri clan of Corellania. Their immense hatred of the left-handed elves would later translate to all elves, and the Zakwan's forces would end up wiping the entire city of all its elven inhabitants. The most ruthless of the Ra-Gada came with the 4th and final wave of the migration, those that were infamously known as the Ankara. Not satisfied with Hammerfell, the self-proclaimed Emperor Tariq Z and his Ankara cut a bloody trail through Hammerfell and eventually set their eyes on Craglorn. By this point in history, Nedic culture and society had long been in decline. When the Ankara came slaughtering through Craglorn, destroying their homes and killing their people, what was left of this ancient Nedic culture met a final bloody end. The fall of Skyreach and the Nedic royalty saw the Nedes pass into history, and their Breton and Imperial descendants taking their place. Number 6. The Night of Tears. The infamous Night of Tears is what many consider to be one of the major turning points in Tamrielic history. The city of Saarthal was an Atmoran settlement in northern Skyrim and was considered the human capital of the region. What eventually led to the sacking of Saarthal by the Snow Elves is unknown. There is some speculation that it is because the Atmorans discovered the Eye of Magnus during their building of the city, and that the Snow Elves, either fearing the Atmorans having such power or coveting it for themselves, attacked. Others claim that the Night of Tears was in retaliation for provocations and blasphemies against the elves. Regardless of the cause, Saarthal was utterly destroyed, and there were only 5 known survivors of the entire city: Ysgramor, his 2 sons Ingol and Ylgar, Rainier the Destroyer, who became a Draugr in the ancient crypts of Windhelm, and a young enchanter who would eventually go on to become the legendary dragon priest Azidal. The Night of Tears would eventually culminate in Ysgramor and his 500 companions returning to Skyrim with their armies, and the subsequent next spot on our list. Number 5. The Return. Ysgramor's return to Skyrim was marked by his 500 companions and the sheer savagery they unleashed upon the Snow Elves in revenge for the razing of Saarthal. When the Atmoran fleet landed on the icy coast of Skyrim, they found great fortifications built by the elves on the ruins of the city. There, the companions were met by Azidal. Enraged by the murder of his wife and child during the burning of Saarthal, The powerful sorcerer enchanted the companions' weapons and armor, emboldening and further enabling them to take what was left of the city, and then further push on to the rest of Skyrim. Ysgramor and his companions were known to have enslaved many snow elves and cruelly worked them to death. Indeed, death by labor was something that the Amorans looked upon as a justified form of torturous execution for the elves they hated with such passion. Even more morose, it wasn't unusual in Ysgramor's time for necklaces to be made out of the severed ears of the snow elves. Ysgramor and the companions pushed the majority of the snow elves out of mainland Skyrim, with pocket communities living in hiding throughout the province, while the remainder sought asylum with the Dwemer in their underground cities. The consequences of the latter, of course, gave rise to the Betrayed, known to most of Tamriel as the Twisted Falmer. The largest community of snow elves post-Ysgramor was a community that had fled to Solstheim. Even there, the snow elves found war and conflict with Nordic settlers, and fought in a great series of skirmishes. The conflict on Solstheim finally ended with the Battle of Mosring, where the Snow Prince was slain and the remaining fleeing snow elves were hunted down and killed. The Nords' genocide of the snow elves would continue on for generations, as even during the reign of High King Harald, who was the 13th in line after Ysgramor, they would still be leading military campaigns against the remaining population of the snow elves. Number 4. The Ayleids' enslavement of the Nedes. Magically and technologically brilliant, and capable of creating reality-warping edifices and artifacts, the Ayleids were arguably the cruelest race to ever exist on Tamriel. Even towards each other, these elves were known to kill to the last man. King Anumaril of Abagarlas was prepared to unleash a necromantic ritual on the city-state Deladil that would drain the life of every person in the city simply because the denizens of Deladil ignored his boasting that his city was better than theirs. When Anumaril and his army marched out, they discovered that the city of Deladil had disappeared. As they returned to Abagarlas, the king and his army were horrified to discover that their families had been burnt to the point that only their scorched outlines remained on the walls of buildings. And as awful as that sounds, it pales in comparison to what the Ayleids did to the various Nedic tribes they had enslaved over the centuries. The demigod Morihaus would write about the horrors that the Ayleids would inflict for joy and sport in his journal titled the ApoAlaia. Men were given over to the lifting of stones and the draining of the fields, and the upkeep of temple and road, or to become art tortures for strange pleasures, as in the wailing wheels of Vindicel and the gut gardens of Circen, and flesh sculpture which was everywhere among the slaves of the Ayleids in those days, or worse, the realms of the Fire King Hadhul, where the beginning of drugs drawn from the admixture of Daedrons into living hosts that would inhale new visions of torment, and children were set aflame for nighttime tiger sport. Morihaus also goes on to state the entire tribe of Nedes, known as the Menamgi, were wiped out, when an Ayleid known as the Flower King Nilichi sacrificed them to some sort of insect god whose name is now lost to the annals of history. Most genocides and forms of ethnic cleansing come about from a sense of hatred, deep-rooted fear, or ruthless avarice. The Ayleids hold the cold distinction of wiping out entire populations for sheer entertainment. Number 3. The Alessian Order. The Ayleids would inevitably fall into a civil war, and the slave queen Alesia took this chance and mounted a rebellion, with the Nords from Skyrim joining her cause and some of the Aedra-worshipping city-states also lending her aid. And most importantly, with direct divine intervention, the Nedic queen established the first empire of Cyrodiil and marked the point in Tamriel's history where humans would begin to direct its socio-economic future, not elves. After establishing the covenant with Akatosh on her deathbed, Alesia passed the throne on to her son, Belharza the Man-Bull, the dragon-born emperor and one of the first recorded Minotaurs. However, xenophobic fears were on the rise in the nascent empire, and pro-human sentiments became more and more prevalent. An imperial scholar known as Nonus Caprinius claims that a famous depiction of Belharza facing down enemies is actually a rendition of him being betrayed by his own human subjects, precursors to the zealots of the Alessian Order. According to Loraden Dinar, the last king of the Ayleids, there was a coup d'etat in the imperial city less than 100 years after Alessia's death, and a new emperor was crowned afterwards, which also coincided with the rise of the Alessian Order. From this, we can infer that Belharza most likely was betrayed. The Alessian Order would bring about a new wave of anti-elven sentiment and would begin several pogroms against the remaining Ayleids that had remained within Cyrodiil, even those who had sided with Alesia and gave her their fealty. They were either driven from their homelands or outright killed, and even when they chose to flee peacefully, they were pursued by the Alessian armies who were constantly pushing the borders of Cyrodiil's empire further and further in the name of religious conquest. The Alessians' xenophobia and pro-human stance reached such an extreme that they even tampered with the divine. The Marukadi Selectives, an extremist branch of the already zealous Alessians, could not reconcile with the simple fact that their beloved Akatosh was the same god that the elves worshipped as Ariel. In an immensely powerful ritual that involved the Staff of Towers and the White Gold Tower, the Marukadi attempted to remove the elven taint from Akatosh and restore him to what they considered purity. The catastrophic ritual resulted in the Middle Dawn, a dragon break that lasted for 1,008 years. The Alessians also popularized the legal philosophy of all are guilty until they have proven themselves innocent, which is still in use by most of Tamriel today, hence why guards are so prone to using lethal force even when the crime is as benign as accidentally setting a chicken on fire. Number 2. Pelinal Whitestrake, the walking genocide himself, and arguably one of the most infamous characters in the entire lore of the Elder Scrolls. Pelinal Whitestrake was conceived by former Bethesda Game Studios developer Michael Kirkbride as a mix between Gilgamesh of Uruk and the T-800 Terminator series, and is chronicled in one of the most popular lore series in the setting, The Song of Pelinal, a 9-part volume detailing his role in Alessia's rebellion against the Ayleids. According to Pelinal himself, he is an Ada, a god of the Arbus, and the Song of Pelinal uses significant imagery and symbolism to paint him as some sort of in-between of Akatosh and Shazar. Most famously, Pelinal possesses a deep, abiding hatred for elves to the point of insanity. Pelinal's divine rage would reach such heights that his rampages wouldn't just kill people, but would cause such destruction that maps would have to be redrawn. Some went as far as to say he literally erased those places from existence and turned them into the void. During one of his many bouts of rage, Pelinal crossed the southern borders of Cyrodiil into Elsewhere and mistook the Khajiit for elves. As such, he began slaughtering them all without hesitation and chased the fleeing Khajiit deep into the south of Anakina, where the Khajiit began climbing the mountains to hide from him. Eventually, Alkosh himself manifested an answer to the Khajiit's prayers and shouted Pelinal down with such force it created a time wound at the top of the mountain of Sunspire. And taking the spot at number 1, the Thrassian Plague. The Slowed are arguably the most reviled race in the entire history of the Elder Scrolls. Going beyond genocide, in the year 2260 of the First Era, the Slowed bioengineered a virus that would be named after their homeland Thrass. Why they created it is unknown, but the Slode would infect sea life with the virus around the coastal waters of Tamriel, which would inevitably end up infecting the denizens as well. The virus would spread from the coast into the inner cities of the continent, ravaging populations and wiping out entire cultures. Over half of the population of Tamriel was annihilated. The devastation of the Thrassian Plague was so grand that Aldmeri ancestor god Sirabane manifested in mortal form as an archmage and helped save many lives with the use of his legendary ring. According to the Lore Pocket Guide to the Empire 1st edition, the Wild Region, these amphibious slugmen, perhaps the most hated race in all of Tamriel, were long thought to be extinct. After the Slode released the Thrassian Plague in the First Era 2200, which claimed more than half of the continent's population, the largest allied naval force in Tamrielic history sailed to Thrass, slaughtered all the Slode they could find, and with great unknown magic sunk their coral kingdoms into the sea. Sadly, it has been reported that Thrass has risen again, and that its masters, the Slode, have recently been seen in various areas of Tamriel. And there you have it, the top 10 times the denizens of Tamriel took murder to a whole new level. If you feel like I missed anything, or should have added something to the list, please be kind and sure to leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more lore videos, kindly like and subscribe for more future content. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you all next time.